Welcome to Andy and Ari On3. It is a massive day of news. There's so much to talk about, Ari Wasserman. We've got Reggie Bush suing the NCAA, Hugh Freeze saying things that, well, we'll get to that. Massive realignment out west. Like there's two conferences just basically pointing guns at each other. Like in a spaghetti western. It is incredible what is going on. Plus, we got to talk more about Alabama, Georgia. We got to have our quarterback discussion that we were going to have. There's a whole lot going on.
Yeah, it's so funny when you think about having a daily podcast, Andy, because the cadence was never this intense for me in the past. It was just like, wow, how are we going to do this? And it's such a stupid thought of like, how are we going to fill up the time? It's easy. It's never ending and it's relentless. And I don't even feel like we have enough time. So I'm excited to get into it. And you know, I've been bubbling these Hugh Freeze thoughts all night, too. So once we get to that segment, I might get a little fiery. But here we go.
You absolutely should. Oh, and Luke Wisdom, Michael Hawkins, QB1. There's more, which we'll probably talk about when we talk about Hugh Freeze, because Oklahoma is playing at Auburn this week. But we'll start with Reggie Bush, which I kind of was wondering when this was coming, when Reggie Bush would sue the NCAA, but he sued the NCAA, the Pac-12, which we'll also talk about a little bit later, and USC, saying, hey, you guys colluded to make sure I couldn't make money off my name, image, and likeness when I was playing, and I could have made a lot of money, so you're going to need to give me some money. And this one is amazing to me because the House settlement, they kept saying, well, this will be it. This will stop all the lawsuits. No, it's not going to stop anything. Reggie Bush has an absolute claim here. Like, of all the people, think about this, Ari, of all the people, who has a better claim than Reggie Bush, who got his Heisman Trophy taken away, who got treated like a criminal in all those stories because some agents gave him some money because he was good at football. Not even USC. Like, USC didn't give him money. Agents gave him money.
Yeah. No, the funniest part about this is that basically anybody who was kind of good before the pre-NIL era has a claim of some sort, you know, like, and we're seeing it and we're going to see it continue. But the ironic part about this one, Andy, is who it's coming from and how he was treated. Like, that's what stands out to me about this. It's like, they wish that the extent of what he got and he was okay with was whatever impermissible benefits that he was receiving at the time. Think about how much money that man was worth. Because I think you could actually make a claim here, and I will, that he was probably the most electrifying, or one of the three most electrifying players in the history of our sport. And I don't know if it was just because it coincided with my childhood and when I was growing up and falling in love with the sport, but I don't remember any other player of any era making my jaw drop quite the same way that Reggie Bush did. And you think about how much money he probably made USC, how much relevance he brought to the Pac-12, all the things. So he got some housing and whatever else he got from his agent. Like, that is peanuts in comparison to what he was worth. And at the time, we took his Heisman away. We made him feel like he was a scumbag, all the things that, you know, went on in his life. And the fact of the matter is that no matter how much he got from an agent during his time in college football, Andy, he was grossly underpaid.
Well, I just looked it up because I was trying to remember. I couldn't remember the exact amount, and I don't know if we have an exact dollar figure. But what do you think it was? Don't look it up. What do you think Reggie Bush got? At least that Yahoo caught him for. What do you think it was?
I'm just guessing a dollar amount without knowing off the top of my head. $23,000.
Okay, you're a little low. About $100,000. About $100,000.
Still.
$100,000. Like, I'm going to sound real bougie here. That's not much even for normal people anymore. Like,
yeah,
$100,000 is a lot of money, but it's not. It doesn't go that far.
What was $100,000 in like 2002? It went a lot further back then, but yeah, it's not going to change anybody's life even back then. And I feel stupid for my grossly low guess, but I just probably figured that at the time, 25,000 was a lot of money, and you could have ripped off a college kid easier then too, because it's always comes back to that to me. It's like, how much can you give somebody while making them feel important while it actually not being enough? And $100,000 probably, hits that bar. And you're absolutely right, Andy. $100,000 is not life-changing amount of money. You still have to work. It's not going to get you more than a few years of extra leeway, depending on what your lifestyle is. And, for somebody who was basically the face of the sport for multiple years and carrying USC to the highest of heights in the game. Think about here's the thing. How much did he get? $100,000? How much would you even estimate? And I know there's probably no way to quantify this based on, inflation and, the way things worked 20 years ago. But what do you think the man was worth at the time?
What was he worth to USC? I mean, they won 2 national titles, one undisputed, one shared. They also had Matt Leinart. They had a lot of other good players, but Reggie Bush was probably the best skill player they had. I'm just trying to think in terms of NIL right now, what would Reggie Bush have commanded his junior year? Like if he'd have gone to USC after sophomore year in this era now and said, all right, I'm on the market. If you would like to keep me, beat everyone. And that would be probably, because he's a running back, he's not a quarterback, but still, given the level of wow he provided every game, $750,000 to $1 million, right? At least
annually,
right? For 1 year, for his junior year. Yeah, that sounds worth more than that to USC.
Yeah, well, the thing that's interesting is that to me that still sounds really low. And you want to sound bougie. $750,000 is a heck of a lot of money, but it's not enough for you to coast for life. I feel like Reggie Bush was good enough at football to be worth enough money to set him up for life if he never worked another day in his life. That's how valuable he was to me. I don't even know if I would love college.
He got that in the NFL because he was drafted high enough for that to happen.
So. Sure. And that's, the old way of thinking about it, right? Pay your dues now and get the NFL. But even if you take the NFL out of the equation, the amount of value that he had for college football, not just USC. I mean, I honestly will sit here right now looking at this camera, Andy, and tell you that I'm not necessarily sure that I would love college football as much as I do if it wasn't for him. That was the guy that was the height of the era from when my mind was still developing. You know what I mean? That guy is a god to me in my head. That's the pinnacle of it. So I don't know, how far this is all going to go down the line. I'm assuming anybody who was a all conference player or even a starter is going to feel like they're owed something because, think about how many people in college football right now in the NIL era who are making a ton of money and aren't necessarily producing the results that you want. I don't want to single anybody out, but there's somebody that pops into my head right now in college football that I know is making a hell of a lot of money who is not doing anything and he's playing. You know what I mean? That's
DJU.
That wasn't who it was, but there's someone else.
We can say it now. Ari,
think about how much money Ollie Gordon is making right now, and he is not producing. And I don't know if it's his fault. I know they've got some line issues or whatever, but he is probably, I know the highest paid NIL recipient on Oklahoma State's roster. He's supposed to be one of the best running backs in college football, and he has not made plays at the level that he's expected to make given the amount of income that he's had. Now, again, maybe that's misallocation of funds from Oklahoma State, Andy, because if you are going to pay a running back a heck of a lot of money and your offensive line is struggling, then you're misallocating the money. But I just, there's a lot of people in college football, and it's not just DJU and Ollie. There's a lot of people who are making a lot. I mean, think about how much money Jackson Arnold's probably making. And he's not even playing anymore. So it's for what Reggie was worth and what some of these guys are making, it's just crazy. And this is just the beginning.
I think Reggie's got a better pain and suffering case than anybody else, just because of the way he was treated and he was vilified unfairly. That whole story was all twisted because the NCAA wanted to make that about USC and punish USC when, in fact, it didn't matter that Reggie Bush played for USC. It didn't matter who Reggie Bush played for. Those agents were going to try to pay him. That wasn't going to change that.
So, and this is just my past, Andy. So don't throw me under the Ohio State homer situation. But right at the beginning of my journalism career,
the tattoos.
I was covering Ohio State. The tattoo gate thing happened. And I know that Terrell Pryor wasn't necessarily as famous or big as Reggie Bush was of his era, and frankly didn't deserve to be. Remember his recruitment? Remember what it was like when he got to Ohio State? And then not only that, because of selling his own stuff for money, I don't even think Terrell got tattoos. He got in trouble. He missed time in his college career and then had to go into the supplemental draft. How much money did this man lose because of the tattoo scandal? That is a joke now.
Right.
Like, it's not even just from college income. You want to talk about pain and suffering? He could have been a first-round draft pick potentially.
Yeah, I wrote it immediately when that broke. Like, those guys should all go pro. Like Terrell Pryor, DeVere Posey. Like, don't sit around and serve out the suspension. Don't put up with that crap. Go pro, because you're being hosed here. Like, that was the ultimate in how just bass-ackward everything was. Because remember, the Big Ten worked a deal with the NCAA so that they could play in the bowl game so they didn't get their asses beat by Arkansas. Like, they needed them for that, but then they can be suspended after that. Like, it was such garbage. And I'm glad it's over. And I'm glad they're having to pay up because they were breaking the law. Like, I hope Reggie Bush soaks them for everything because they were breaking the law. If they had just chosen not to break the law, if they had chosen to let people get money for being good at football, which is not morally wrong, they wouldn't be dealing with this right now.
Yeah.
But they were greedy, and pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered, and they are getting slaughtered now, and good.
Yeah. So, I'm no economist.
Enjoy your money, Reggie Bush.
I'm no economist, Andy, so maybe you can walk me through this. But there are going to be a lot of lawsuits that are of the same ilk coming out of the woodwork, right? Like, didn't Braylon Edwards just file one a few weeks ago for Michigan?
And the NC State basketball team that won the national title in the 80s.
So if there are a million of these, because I'm assuming that, if anybody sees somebody sue something for something that applies to them and get money, that they're going to want money too, right? That's just human nature.
Yeah.
How much money can this system hemorrhage before there's a problem? I don't. It's not like an unlimited amount of money.
No,
right?
it's not an unlimited amount.
So,
of money.
I don't know. This is going to be really uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's going to be very uncomfortable, and a lot of people who've been making a lot of money for a long time are going to have to make less money now.
Yeah,
but they didn't deserve the money they were making in the first place because they were stealing it from other people.
Yeah,
so
I'm with you.
That's what you get. You steal from other people. Eventually, you would have to pay it back. So, at least hopefully. But that's fine. Like, because here's the thing. They're going to keep putting football on TV. TV networks are still going to keep paying for it.
And more
people
and
seem
more
to like
more.
it. They're going to keep staging football games that 90,000 people, 100,000 people are going to keep showing up to. So guess what? It's not going to end the enterprise because there's still people who want to pay to see it. So now they're not allowed to steal from these people anymore. They're going to have to pay some of the people they stole from. And that's the end of it. Speaking of all this, now that we're in a new system, which has its own perils, pitfalls, all kinds of new stuff, one way to find out more about it is watch The Money Game on Prime Video. Incredible docuseries following LSU athletes through last football season and spring and winter. And so you get Jayden Daniels, Angel Reese, Livvy Dunne. These are all people that have taken advantage of the NIL system, but kind of in different ways. Like Jayden Daniels, I don't know that Jayden Daniels even had any clue how good he was going to be as a senior. And by the way, Ari, I don't know if you saw him last night. Jayden Daniels may be that guy in the NFL now. But Angel Reese did know going in that this was going to be the year to capitalize. Livvy Dunne was already an influencer, essentially, who wasn't allowed to make money. And then NIL came and she could make money as an influencer. And it just went supernova. So it's so interesting how all of this changed so fast. And it kind of dovetails in with what we're talking about with Reggie Bush. And so if you'd like to explore that further, watch The Money Game on Prime Video. It's all 6 episodes are out right now. Click the link in the show description of the YouTube video that you're watching or the podcast you're listening to. It'll take you right to it if you're already a Prime Video subscriber. If you are not a Prime Video subscriber, by all means, click that link and get yourself signed up, and you can watch The Money Game. NFL football on Thursday nights, the Rings of Power. There's a new episode of that coming out Thursday. Just saying. It's fantastic. Watch the Money Game. Click that link in the show description. It'll take you right there. All right, Ari. Your favorite coach is still talking. So you had a rant on Saturday night after hearing Hugh Freeze throw both of his quarterbacks under the bus following the loss to Arkansas. But Hugh Freeze was not done, because on Monday he went on Tiger Talk on basically the coach's radio show. And, well, he had this to say.
I mean, no offense whatsoever to Arkansas or to Cal. I love Sam Pittman. I hope he wins the rest of his games. But I'm telling you, the hard truth is we play them 9 more times, we beat them 9 times. And that's what's hard to take. And it's hard for our fans, I'm sure, and it's certainly hard for us. And you have 460-something yards, and we only had 50-something plays of offense because we turned it over 5 times.
Ari, do you know who this is?
I do know who this is.
You know who this is?
Who is this?
This is Dan Mullen after losing at Kentucky.
Oh, wow.
Well, who gained more yards?
Yeah. You know what's crazy is that if you have a quarterback or quarterbacks who are prone to turning the ball over, they're probably going to turn the ball over in the other games too, Hugh. They keep the score of the game because the points scored is the hardest thing to do, and it keeps track of who's doing it the best. So the reason why you had less points than Auburn was because your team was unable to score, which is the point of the game. And I just don't know what you gain from this. I'm hearing it, and it's like, is he supposed to be thinking that making fans feel better? Does he think that he's not throwing his quarterbacks under the bus again? Like, every single thing that there was about this interview just rubbed me the wrong way. It's just like, you lost, and the reason why you lost is because you gambled on your quarterbacks and you gambled wrong. It's your fault. Again, it's Tuesday. It's still your fault. What is the point of that? And by the way, it's wrong. I would bet any amount of money. I think I would leverage my entire checking account right now to be able to sim 10 games of that in a row. I guarantee you Auburn would not win 9 of them. I'm not even sure they win half of them, because you know what?
5 of them.
Yeah, I mean, they moved the ball on offense, but when you have a quarterback or two that are prone to turning the ball over, that's not just because they had a bad game. It's not like they had no turnovers for the past month and then had 5 in one game. Then maybe have this conversation. But they turn the ball over every single game, which is why you keep benching them and replacing them over and over again. Like, this is insane to me.
Here's the other piece of this. The turnovers sucked. And actually, the most costly turnover is not one of the interceptions. It was the fumble the fumble into the end zone when you're about to score. That was way costlier. But here's why you can't say that. Because I think there are games where you can probably say that. You can't say that about this game. Because how did Arkansas put the game away? By running the ball down their throats. Remember, they get bailed out by a pass interference call, get a first down in their own territory, and then they never throw it again and wind up in the end zone. That is Auburn's fault. That is not Arkansas getting lucky. That is Auburn not being able to stop it when they know what is coming. You will lose 100% of the time when you do that. 100% of the time. So,
and that's just the physicality of the sport too. That's not happenstance. That's just man against man hitting each other and the stronger one winning. That's football in its purest form. So, like, I understand that the man is frustrated. Like, I totally understand it. Like, I throw my controller against the couch whenever I throw an interception in the NCAA. I can't imagine if that was my whole life, my whole livelihood, and you feel like you're doing good things and people turn it over. Like, he's not allowed to be frustrated. He is. But the way that this man behaves in public, it's just awful. And I don't know how long. I think that, it's still very early in his tenure there. And I'm not going to turn on the burner to, begin this hot seat discussion because it's far too early for that probably.
No.
But I will say
we will stop that right now.
No, but here, let me finish my point though. My point is that when you lose and then you behave like this, I think that you are shortening your own clock, however long it may be. I think people will get tired of you faster. I think people will like, do you think that Auburn fans are listening to what he's saying right now and are galvanized by it or are annoyed by it? Like, I'm very annoyed by it.
Yeah, I went on the message boards at Auburn Live last night just to see where they're at.
Mm-hmm.
They are annoyed by it. What they are trying to do, and I understand this because they've seen this all go down a lot of different ways, especially at that school. They're trying to avoid this becoming another Brian Harsin situation where they're trying to frag the coach a year and a half in. Because I do think like Hugh Freeze understands the assignment, and there is a path for Hugh Freeze to turn this into a winning program. But this isn't helping. And I think it's a source of massive frustration for the Auburn fans because they don't want to hear this. They just want to hear, we're going to make this better. And then they need to do it. The problem is they got to play Oklahoma this week, which, you know who's great at turning you over? Oklahoma's defense. Then they play Georgia. Then they have Kentucky and Missouri, or Missouri and Kentucky on the road, by the way. They're staring down the barrel of 5 consecutive losses if this does not turn around quick. And
well, here's the reality of the situation though, Andy. And it's just like, sometimes you are what you are, and like Auburn's going to have quarterback issues this year. And I think we could have predicted that they were going to have quarterback issues going into the year. But I don't like when a coach throws his players under the bus. But if he were to say in a diplomatic way, like, we went about recruiting the quarterback position a certain way this offseason, and we're going to have to evaluate how we do it again in the future. Basically, a nice way of saying we messed up how that
would be him taking blame rather than blaming the quarterback.
I think that would be the way out here. Like, the way out here is that our quarterbacks stink. We would win every time we played if they didn't turn the ball over and they listened to what I told them to do. Like that, your job as the coach, fundamentally, Andy, is to be able to get your players to do what you're telling them to do. It's almost another admission of guilt because the best coaches in America all have an idea of what perfection or success looks like, and their players do it. That's the definition of being a good coach. So don't tell me that the players aren't doing what you're saying. You can't get your players to do what you're saying. And it's either one of two things. One, you're not coaching well enough, or two, you did a terrible job with the evaluation of your position and they are physically incapable of doing what you're telling them to do. Either way you slice it, it is your fault. Either way.
Yeah. And so here's the thing. I want to give a little silver lining to the Auburn people, because I'm looking in the chat and there's a couple Auburn fans in there and they're talking about, hey, remember when we lost to Diego Pavia in New Mexico State last year? Now we have to play him at Vandy. Like, think about that Auburn's afraid of losing to Vandy right now. That's where they're at. But I'm gonna throw a little silver lining at you. They are moving the ball. They're actually moving the ball really well. If they can stop throwing it to the other team. And look, I think I went and rewatched the game. Peyton Thorne certainly played better than Hank Brown in that game. I think he gives you a better chance to win. The last interception wasn't even Peyton Thorne's fault. It was the receiver alligator armed it. It bounced off his hands and into the arms of an Arkansas defender. Like, there's a way out of this. This team's averaging 6.2 yards or 6.3 yards a carry. Like, and you say, oh, well, that includes the games against the teams that weren't any good. Against Cal, which was the worst game they had, they averaged 4 yards a carry. Against Arkansas, they averaged 5.6. Like, Jarquez Hunter's worst game is 5.7 yards a carry. Like, they are moving the ball. And maybe they just need to try to move it on the ground more if moving it through the air is too dangerous. But when they are not throwing it to the other team, they are throwing it pretty well. Peyton Thorne's averaging 10 yards per attempt.
This isn't probably a USC Michigan discussion, right? Like not USC, a Michigan discussion or an Iowa discussion where your offense just fundamentally can't get a first down.
Well, it is kind of though. It is kind of because what did I say about Sharon Moore last week? What was the whole point of that?
Yes.
You figure out a way to put your team in the best position to win a game with what you have. Hugh Freeze is not doing that because he keeps calling things that keep getting the ball put in danger when he has an offense that moves it very well on the ground. So maybe you adjust your thinking a little bit and you do the thing that wins you the game.
So you're saying play like Michigan if you're Auburn.
If you have to. If you go out there running your normal offense and you throw a pick in the first two series, shut it down and run it at them.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're running really well. You're good at running the ball.
Well, I will tell you, Andy, the spread for the Oklahoma-Auburn game opened as OU minus 2.5, and it has now moved to OU minus 1.5. So, people are thinking that Auburn's gonna, either win or
people
be
are
in the
realizing
game
that Auburn's not that bad, and there's an element of randomness to this.
Yeah, well, there's an element of randomness to fumbles and bounces and tips and stuff. I don't know if there's an element of randomness to the interception that Hank Brown threw before halftime. Like
No.
there was a line there between like what is a random turnover and what is an unforced turnover and what is a mistake that you made. And I think that like there were some unforced turnovers and there were some forced turnovers in that game, especially in the first half. So I think if Hugh Freeze goes back to Peyton Thorne, who's played a lot more and didn't have any, if that I recall, egregious, terrible mistakes, that maybe that gives you the best chance to win because your thought is to limit the backbreaking turnovers. But, Peyton Thorne at his best is not a very explosive player. So I guess we're not at the point now where, you bring in Cam Coleman and you're hoping for explosive plays downfield and moving the ball in chunks. What you're wanting to do is have
10 yards per attempt. You will take that. You can win the Heisman averaging 10 yards per attempt.
Yeah, that's true. But what I'm saying, though, is that like you're probably going to be in a position where you are limiting throwing the ball downfield as much as you want because you don't want to turn the ball over. You move the ball on the ground, you sustain drives, you hold the ball longer, and you do your best to keep yourself in games without having a catastrophic mistake. So, I don't know. Here's the thing. I saw this in real life, Andy, on Saturday night. Oklahoma's defense is freaking awesome. So, if you are, in a position where you think that they're going to get 10 yards an attempt and not turn the ball over on Saturday, I think that you're probably going to be sorely mistaken. I think Oklahoma's
right, and they're probably not going to be able to run the ball as easily as they did on Arkansas. Arkansas's offense, I think, is really fun and exciting. I think it's possible to score on Arkansas's defense, and they would have scored more had they not turned it over. But that said, when you're down 3 and the other team just decides to run the ball, that's not the fault of the quarterbacks. That's not the fault of interceptions. That's you just getting straight up beat. That's your defense getting straight up beat. So you can't say that if you played it 10 more times, you'd win 10, or if you played it 9 more times, you'd win 9, because you wouldn't. Because if Bobby Petrino's thinking clearly, he just stops throwing too.
Yeah.
And you can't stop them.
They had a pretty easy time running the football at the end of the game there.
Yeah. So that's where it's at. But Hugh Freeze needs a win, whether that's against Oklahoma, whether that's against, I don't know that the one's coming against Georgia, but Missouri, Kentucky, Vanderbilt. Hugh Freeze needs to figure this out, and he needs to be the one who figures it out. It doesn't have to be a quarterback magically not throwing the ball to the other team. Hugh Freeze puts your team in a position where that quarterback doesn't have to throw the ball to the other team, where he doesn't have to put it in danger at all. You actually are capable of that. You have it. I said this about Kansas State. I said this about Michigan. If you have a running game that gains 6 yards every time you run, you never have to throw if you don't want to. Yeah. So just don't if you don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there are only a certain amount of teams in this sport, and I guess Michigan, to a certain extent, maybe one of the few that, can still run the ball for 6 yards a carry when the other team knows you're running the ball. Like that's a really, like, the statistics there are nice.
No,
but
you obviously you're going to have to throw the ball a little bit. But the thing is, if you are running the ball that much, you're not going to be dealing with a lot of confusing coverages. You're not going to be dealing with a lot of disguised things because they're so scared of you running the ball. Mm-hmm. So, again, Hugh Freeze has the option to change some things and make this work. That's what the money's for. Figure it out. All right. Ari, we're going to talk about FUBO. If you wanted to watch that the Auburn Oklahoma game or the Arkansas Texas A&M game, you can watch on FUBO. Catch the biggest and the best games, including most top 25 matchups, most games from the Power 4 conferences, and many games from the Group of 5. Every FUBO plan includes the best channels for live college football: ABC, CBS, Fox, NBC, ESPN 1 and 2, FS1, Big Ten Network, CBS Sports, and CW. You can also get the ACC Network and the SEC Network on the FUBO Pro plan in select local markets. Cut the cord. Bring it with you wherever you go. Watch your live sports with FUBO. If you want to get signed up, there is a link in the show description of the YouTube video you're watching and the podcast you're listening to. Click that link, get yourself signed up, and get watching. Cut that cord. You don't need to deal with all that cable company mess. Cheaper, easier, everything you need with FUBO. All right. Before we get into more Bama and Georgia discussion, which we definitely need to talk about, we got to talk about the realignment going on. That Monday was one of the craziest days of realignment in college sports history. Now, because of the schools involved, it doesn't get the headlines that say Texas and Oklahoma going to the SEC or Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten. It doesn't get that. But what happened was nuts, because basically you've got the Pac-12. They are trying to get to 8 schools. Because 8 schools is the magic number where the NCAA recognizes you as a conference that can have an automatic bid to the NCAA basketball tournament. You get shares. There's a lot of money involved in that. They were at 6. They're trying to get to 8. They talked to a bunch of different schools. And you get an interesting statement in the middle of the day from Memphis, from UTSA, from Tulane, from USF saying, we're committed to the American. We're good here. It's like, okay, that's interesting. Then you get a statement from UNLV. We're committed to the Mountain West. We're good here. It's like, uh-oh, what's the Pac-12 going to do? They're going to have to go get the Montana schools or something? Oh, no. They went and got Utah State. Utah State says last night that they're going to the Pac-12. Now the Pac-12 has 7 schools. And the Mountain West has 7 schools. And you need 8. They're just pointing the guns at each other. So Las Vegas Review-Journal reports late Monday night that UNLV, which had said it was solid in the Mountain West earlier, a few hours earlier, they're reconsidering some things. Maybe they want to go to the Pac-12. Also, Gonzaga may be in the mix for the Pac-12 as a non-football member. This is crazy. One of these conferences might not exist by the end of the day.
Yeah. And it kind of feels like something's going to happen Tuesday.
Yeah, it does. It does. Something is going to happen. And when all this started, I was one of many people saying, hey, look, they're just going to merge. Washington State and Oregon State are going to merge with the Mountain West schools. They'll use the Pac-12 branding. They'll call themselves the Pac-12 because it's a stronger brand. There would have been a very clean way to do that. It didn't work out because I think the Mountain West maybe overplayed its hand negotiating all that. And now we're waiting to see, are they just going to take, would the Mountain West just dissolve and all those schools go to the Pac-12 and they become a 14-team league? Or would they merge? Or what if the American in the Mountain West or the American in the Pac-12? It's all on the table now.
So American, and save me from being an idiot, but my understanding is that the American has a really solid television deal in place, right? So
solid-ish compared to
solid-ish
to the power schools.
But the Pac-12 has no television deal in place. So we have a bird in the hand versus potential battle here.
Yes.
Right? Like that's what's
and
going
there's
on
exit
over there.
fees. Like I think if you're Tulane or Memphis or USF or UTSA, you're going, look, this is sort of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. The amount we're going to have to pay to get out of the American, we're going to have to make that back up in the Pac-12, and it doesn't compute. It doesn't add up. So it was more sensible for them to stay. Plus, remember, we don't yet know what's going to happen with the ACC. If they are going to reduce their grant of rights by multiple years, then they put the detonation clock on their league, and they're going to have to backfill. So those schools might wind up going there.
Yeah. It is so interesting to me too, Andy, because we are now merging former power schools with former group of 5 schools and having to retrain our brains to understand how to even consider the final product of these conferences is going to be interesting when we get there.
It's a group of 5 conference. And that's the thing. I said, use the Pac-12 branding because in your mind, as soon as you, when you hear that name and you see the patch on the jersey, you're like, oh, power conference.
Yeah.
But that's not what it is. Let's be real here. That's not what it will be. Let's say the Pac-12 wins this. They wind up with the most teams. They wind up with the bulk of that group. It's not a power conference. It's a group of 6 conference at that point.
I've got a take on some other conferences not being a power conference either at this point. But here's I'm going to just give a round of applause here because, everybody thought that, Washington State and Oregon State were in the fetal position on the West Coast. They were left out. They were left for dead, and they rose up from the darkness, baby. And now they're breaking skulls. Now they're breaking
exactly.
Skulls.
I listen. It is a cutthroat, bloodthirsty game that they are playing, and they lost it last year. They're winning it right now. Now they still gotta finish the deal. They gotta finish the drill today. But I'm amazed at just how this has gone. And there was that crazy day during one of the earlier rounds of realignment where the WAC was trying to just gut the Mountain West. Mm-hmm. And Mountain West Commissioner Craig Thompson, who he'd just been at his daughter's wedding. He was in an airport the whole time. He had a flight delay. He essentially gutted the WAC. Ended the WAC as an FBS conference in a matter of hours from the airport because the WAC was trying to steal a couple of their schools. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to steal a couple of the WAC schools, and that'll be that. And that's exactly what happened. That was wild. What's going on Monday and Tuesday this week? Even wilder.
Hey, can we start a new segment on the show where you explain things to me that I don't understand? That has nothing to do with sports, because you said something earlier on, and I've heard this a lot. You said it was like a spaghetti Western. Can you explain to me what what the genesis of the spaghetti part of that is?
What's the spaghetti Western? That's easy. So these were Western themed movies, like American Westerns, your Clint Eastwood type movies. I believe the director's name is Fellini. He was an Italian, and they filmed them in Italy. So they call them spaghetti Westerns.
Okay. Got it. I didn't know that. See, the more you know.
Yep, there you go.
I mean, co-hosting a show with you, Andy, is just like reading an encyclopedia. Because the one thing I've always said, and people are like, so how's Andy? And I'll be like, yeah, he's a really cool dude. But the one thing that you need to know about him is that the guy seems to know more than the average person knows about everything. There are certain things with me, I don't know. Somebody just made a joke about how this is how Hulk Hogan joined the WWE. And it's I'm sure you know what that reference means. I have no idea what that means. I just wish I had that
cannot
power.
Remember the story of Hulk Hogan joining WWE from whatever regional. I think what Goat Dog is trying to say is when Hulk Hogan joined WCW and started.
You're doing it again right now.
Yeah.
You're doing it again. Yeah. Where it's oh, you can just have an intelligent conversation about wrestling right now. There are things that I think I know a lot about: gambling, stocks, video games, fast food, and then Everything else I know nothing about. And college football in there too.
Well, it's not useful. I can promise you that, because I forget. Like, I was supposed to buy dog food yesterday and I forgot. So
yeah.
Well, I think there are better uses for brain cells than some of this useless trivia. It does help on a podcast. I will say that.
It does.
All right. We got to talk PrizePicks, but we're going to talk PrizePicks in a very practical way, because we've got your Georgia-Alabama preview presented by PrizePicks. And look, download PrizePicks, use the code Staples, play $5, get $50 instantly. You know how it works. You're playing squares. You're picking squares. You pick at least two. You pick two or more. The more squares you pick, the higher the potential payout. There's already a board up for Alabama, Georgia, Ari. Already a board.
Christmas,
and I think we can use these numbers to try to determine what's going to happen. And right now, like, the first thing I look at, the first one in the corner, is a goblin square for Arian Smith, the Georgia wide receiver, 40.5 receiving yards. So goblin squares are the ones that are a little bit easier to get. You think you say more than, and it's a little bit easier to get. You can go to a demon one, which would have more. But I think if Arian Smith is in the 50 to 60 yard range, that's pretty good. Dominic Lovett, his number's 46.5. If he's more than that, Dylan Bell, his number's 32.5 receiving yards. If he's more than that, like, if you see those if two of those Georgia pass catchers go more than, I'm feeling really good about Georgia in this game.
Yeah. So we did talk about this in the picks show on Monday, and I've had about 24 hours to marinate it. I actually wrote a story on On3 that's up right now, just 4 thoughts about the game. And as I was going through it, like, I started to realize that I was feeling a lot more comfortable and confident with the Alabama pick. So, like, yeah, those numbers are all very manageable numbers for Georgia pass catchers to get to. But are any of those numbers, like, eye popping out of your head, you know this person's going to get there type of a thing? Like, and it's just like reinforces my angst about it.
Well, right. And that's there's no guarantee of that. And I think the lower the score, the better the chance that Alabama wins. I think Georgia probably can, if it gets into where it's a shootout, where Georgia's scoring on Alabama's defense quite a bit, then I think there's a good chance Georgia wins. And I know that's probably counterintuitive, because you're thinking, okay, Alabama's got the explosive offense. If it's a shootout, Georgia's not going to be able to keep up.
No, but what you're saying is that Georgia's moving the ball too. At that level.
Remember that both these teams have good enough defenses to use the defense, if it's playing well, to dictate the tempo of the game. So it's not if you are moving the ball, then Georgia may play a little bit different game defensively if they're moving it than if they're not moving it. They're going to get more. They're going to try to make Alabama more conservative if that's the case. So. And then Jalen Milroe is sort of the X factor in all of this. His passing yardage number is 204.5, which and I one thing to point out, we had a question in the chat from Ben. Weather might affect the game. No, it's possible. So there's a hurricane in the Gulf, and obviously I'm looking at this because it may hit us, but it is probably going to make landfall in Florida Thursday late afternoon into the night. It's moving very fast. It actually may not affect the Georgia-Alabama game, because it may be north of there by then. They would get it probably sometime Friday night, Saturday morning. By Saturday night, I think the storm would be somewhere else if it keeps moving as fast as it is. And that's your meteorology segment with Andy and Ari.
There he goes now, everyone. Just talking about the speed of a storm.
I have to know this because I have to know if my kids are going to school on Thursday or Friday. Like, this is these are important. I had to buy water this morning. So the Milroe number, the passing number, 204.5. Like, if he's more than that, I think Georgia's in trouble, because If Ryan Williams has that demon square 0.5 rushing and receiving touchdowns, if he's getting loose, Georgia's in trouble.
Yeah. Well, I think that, there's been a lot of Jeremiah Smith mania, in college football this year because he's been very good. And for whatever reason, it feels like not enough people are appreciating how good Ryan Smith is. Could you imagine if Georgia had him?
No. That would be pretty terrifying. I mean, it would change.
Like if Georgia had
Georgia just needs someone to take the top off the defense.
Mm-hmm. I had a dream about that last night. I know it doesn't really help us in this conversation, but I just thought like that's the missing piece that Georgia has and Alabama has it. Like I think that demon square of more than 0.5 receiving and rushing yards for him is a
touchdowns.
Very attractive.
It's not a freebie.
Touchdown. No, sorry. Yeah, touchdowns is a very attractive play because if Alabama's going to win this game, I think he's going to have to make plays. I think he's going to have to be a game changer. He's going to have to get behind the defense. He's going to have to score. And I think that's going to happen. So I am in love with this kid's talent. He's fast as hell. He's 17 years old, and he's going to be a household name in the sport for the next 3 years before he's off to the NFL.
So Jalen Milroe also 251.5 pass plus rushing yards. So that gives you some flexibility. But this is you answering a question about what you think Jalen Milroe is in 2024 versus 2023. Because this is a game. Now, last year, Jalen Milroe was really good against Georgia in the SEC championship game. There were other games, the Michigan game, the Arkansas game, some other games were early in the Tennessee game, the first half of the Tennessee game, where it felt like he took some sacks that maybe he didn't have to take. Mm-hmm. And that's the question. Does he walk into some sacks or is he over that now? Because if he's over that now and he doesn't do that anymore, that 251.5 is pretty enticing because he's going to gain his on the ground. The question is, how many sacks will he take that reduces that rushing total?
Yeah, he's averaging 52 yards a game on the ground this year and has had a few explosive play. If you're viewing Jalen Milroe as somebody who's rushing the ball 15 times a game, like that's not his game anymore.
No.
So like
he's going to squirt loose for one long one. It's like the LSU game last year. Right. Squirt loose for a couple long ones.
Yeah. And I think that's on the table, especially considering how many people Georgia has to cover in this game. But I don't know that the extra rushing yards on that number sways me because I'm not sure. I think that's going to be more of a random. Does he find some green on a play and rush for 45 or 50 on one play is more than it is a sustained 4, 6, 8, 12, 13, 17 type of, rushing statistic output.
So producer Rivers saying go for the demon square 0.5 rushing receiving TDs, Jam Miller, Alabama running back. I think he just likes to say Jam Miller. And I will say Jam Miller is a hell of an interview, by the way. We talked to him after the Wisconsin game. I can listen to that guy talk all day. So, if you get that, you're going to get another good Jam Miller interview. So the producer River trying to wish good content for the show into existence, and I appreciate that.
What's interesting is that you would say that Jam Miller would be the perfect name for a running back, but it just makes me want a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, Andy. Every single time I hear the name, I just want to put a little jam on some peanut butter and maybe toss it in the toaster or something.
It's probably lunch today, by the way.
Is that what you're going to have?
I'm going blueberry preserves
for
the jelly.
I've never heard of a human being even buying that. So that's
what I've got in the fridge right now. But I like that. When I was a kid, it was purely peanut butter with apple jelly. Obviously, grape jelly is your classic, but I'm not always in the mood for grape jelly. Strawberry jam makes a great PB&J, but I'm telling you, the Polaner all fruit blueberry preserves. You may be too young to remember this commercial, but I know the people in the chat do. I know my old people in the chat remember this. The Polaner all fruit commercial where you have all the fancy people at the table. Please pass the Polaner all fruit. Please pass the Polaner all fruit. And then there's a guy in a cowboy hat. Could you please pass the jelly? And then the woman faints.
Every time
I'm scooping it out and putting it on the bread, I was like, could you please pass the jelly?
So you went to the grocery store and you were in the jelly area and you're like, okay, there's grape. I'm going to not pick that up. There's strawberry. Yep. I'm not going to pick that up. I'm going to get blueberry jam.
Yep.
That's what happened. Okay. Just curious.
Yeah. You know what else is good when I want to change things up?
Huh.
Apricot.
Oh, I like apricot. But I wouldn't put it on the pantheon above the two goats. You know what I mean?
Listen, sometimes you got to change things up. We're going to change things up now. We're going to talk about a column I wrote yesterday. We actually started talking about this a little bit on the show yesterday, but we didn't have time to let this segment breathe. So now we do. I was writing about the situations at Oklahoma and at Kansas State, where I think Oklahoma fans watching that game Saturday night against Tennessee are going, oh God, why do we not have Dillon Gabriel playing quarterback for us this year? Why is he playing at Oregon? And then Kansas State fans watching Avery Johnson throw interceptions to BYU players who were not actually near any Kansas State players going, oh God, we could have Will Howard still, and we don't. Now, before the Oklahoma fans get into this, I know it's a lot more complicated. Like, it was not a case of Brent Venables going, I'm just choosing Jackson Arnold over Dillon Gabriel. Like, when Jeff Lebby got hired away from Oklahoma as the OC to become the head coach at Mississippi State, it probably made it where you weren't getting Dillon Gabriel back. Because unless Venables could promise it was going to be exactly the same offense, Dillon Gabriel had other options. And so I understand that. They were rebuilding the offensive line. What I was curious about, because the K-State one is a more cut and dried, like they picked Avery Johnson, and there are reasons they had to do that too. I'm not ripping Venables or Chris Kleiman for this. What I'm asking is, Ari, do we have to change how we think about this? Where if you got a veteran QB, even if he only has 1 year of eligibility left, but he's a veteran QB who's been good, do you just have to pay to keep him and let the young guy walk?
Well, I actually think that it is an interesting situation, Andy, because your premise, frankly speaking, let's just put it out there, is that there will always be another quarterback. If you lose a young guy who hasn't proven himself yet, go get another one, right?
Yes.
And I think that that makes sense. But in Kansas State's situation, where Avery Johnson is a top 100 recruit from the state of Kansas.
Yes.
That doesn't happen very often. So, I think that there's always another quarterback for Oklahoma. I think there's always another quarterback for Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State and even Michigan, potentially, if they were given the opportunity to go get one based on the timing of that. I don't know that that's true. So, for everyone, that is. So, I think if you're Kansas State, you're kind of in a position where if you know you're going to lose Avery Johnson and you are high on his potential, not just in the immediate future, but the long-term future, you almost have to take that assessment based on how good you think the rest of your team is going to be that next year. Do you let the kid walk because you know your team can win 10 games and make a playoff run if you keep the veteran? Or is your team going to be an 8 or 9 win team at best, regardless of who the quarterback is, and make the decision for your future at that time? Now, obviously, it also depends on what the expectation of your fans are, because some places, when you and I had Ryan Day on the show a few weeks ago, we were talking to him off camera a little bit, and he said, at Ohio State, you can't just plan for what you're doing here now. You have to do next year and the year after and the year after, because you can't lose 4 or 5 games in the season. So, I think the calculus is very different on a year-to-year basis, depending on what your roster looks like, but also, to your program. Who are you? Are you going to be able to go get another quarterback that has this skill set? And funny enough, maybe the answer to that question in your mind is yes, because Will Howard, if I don't recall, was a 4 or 5 star player. So Kansas found Will Howard so they could find somebody else. But I do think that, there's no blanket answer to this. I think it's very
Kansas State has repeatedly found good quarterbacks. I mean, Colin Klein was a great quarterback in college. Michael Bishop was a great quarterback in college.
Al Roberson, remember that name?
Yeah, exactly. So it is possible, but I understand. That's why I wrote it the way I did. I'm not ripping anybody. I'm genuinely asking the question because I don't know that Chris Kleiman had another choice. But I think the distinction you made, well, also you talk about expectations. Kansas State does expect to win the Big 12 this year, or came into this year expecting to win the Big 12.
Yeah.
If they don't, and it's because they got shelled by BYU, or because they're the type of team that can get shelled by BYU, and you wouldn't be that type of team with Will Howard, then you messed up.
Yeah, right.
So
yeah, I wouldn't trade immediate success if you feel as a coach and you analyze your roster of like, we could go win the Big 12 this year. I wouldn't think about 2 or 3 years down the line if you're looking down the camera right here at a potential playoff season. I think you always take the good season that's right in front of your face first. But here's the other thing too. And maybe I wasn't at On3 yet, and I didn't have access to the message boards yet, but I don't recall Kansas State fans being all angry about this. I don't remember Oklahoma fans being livid about this. I think that both programs were fine with it because on the surface, who you were trading for or who you were opting to was a player that had a heck of a lot of potential based on his recruiting ranking. And like, honestly, if you've read or heard anything about Jackson Arnold since his arrival at Oklahoma, it was that he was a stud in the locker room from day one, that people gravitated toward him, that he was going to be the next Oklahoma great. So like, now that we're sitting in this position with Hawkins starting against Auburn on Saturday, and that Oklahoma is having a quarterback, disaster the same way that Auburn is, like, this was not on my expectation list coming into the year.
And that's why I asked the question, because a lot of the stuff in the NIL era has sort of copied what has happened in the NFL in terms of the pay scale. And I'm wondering if the quarterback situation will then copy what has happened in the NFL, because that's where the thinking is different. In the NFL, if you have a veteran quarterback who has tread left on his tires, you don't even think about it. You don't let him hit free agency. You re-sign him. Like, do I think the Cowboys are going to win a Super Bowl with Dak Prescott ever? No. But Dak Prescott is a safer choice than trying to draft someone better than Dak Prescott. Because there's a better than 50% chance that whoever you go after next is not better than Dak Prescott, and then you're going to get killed. So that's the part in college
where I know you have to do in the NFL, but I think it's loser mentality.
I agree.
Accepting mediocrity because you don't want to be terrible is such a loser mentality.
My thing with the Cowboys they shouldn't re-sign CeeDee Lamb. They shouldn't re-sign Dak. The only person they needed to re-sign was Micah Parsons, and then go from scratch. But that's not how that works.
Well, receivers in the NFL too are pretty important. Like having a bona fide number one helps.
But if you're Jerry Jones and you let Dak go to free agency and the quarterback you have next year is not as good as Dak Prescott, you're getting murdered. Like that, not literally, but obviously figuratively on all the Stephen A. Smith debate shows.
But he already is. He already is.
I know.
I mean, people make fun of him all the time. Yeah.
So here Luke in the chat says Michael Hawkins has been outplaying Arnold since the spring. The coaches have known who's better. They've let Arnold fail on the national stage before they could make the move. I don't think it really works that way, but it may be that he's better. But that also plays into what I said. There's always another quarterback. And Ari, you're probably right. Kansas State is a different case than Oklahoma, than Auburn, than Tennessee, than Michigan, than Ohio State, like Florida.
Right?
If you're one of those, there's always another quarterback. And in this case, Oklahoma may already have that other quarterback. But but we have to retrain our brains, and especially the people who read us here at On3 and follow us here. Like, there's a much higher percentage of people in our audience that are recruitniks, that follow the recruiting. That's still not the majority of college football fans. The majority of college football fans just watch the games. They just want to win the games. But there are a lot of people, it's a healthy chunk that follows the recruiting, and they fall in love with these guys. And they become like, this is my guy. Like DJ Lagway for a Florida fan, that's their guy. Jackson Arnold for an Oklahoma fan was their guy. And when I was writing the column, I looked it up just to see. Jackson Arnold committed to Oklahoma 8 months before Dylan Gabriel took a snap for Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
The love affair had gone on longer.
Yeah. And so there is a certain connection to that. And I think the reason why, especially with players who arrive to your school through the high school ranks, is that people who go to that school have an inherent connection to people who opt to do what they did. and to walk the same type of path.
Right.
Now, you know, if you're a transfer and you come in and you're awesome, people will love you. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, Dylan Gabriel didn't start his career at Oklahoma. Now they're wishing he was still there. But the connection, the emotional connection that people have to the players that come in through the high school ranks, live in the same dorms that they lived in, live, you know, moderately the same life, go to the same restaurants. Like there is a thing there. So like,
it's not the same life you lived.
I know.
Even pre-NIL, it wasn't the same life you lived, but I get it. I understand.
Yeah. They walk through the same the same classroom hallways and the same restaurants and the same bars and all that. I know they're not living in the dorms next door to you. I mean, at Arizona, they did. I lived in the same hall as Willie Tuitama when I was in college. So like, that's not, I don't know if that's how it is everywhere, but I know they have athlete dorms now too.
Yeah, but it is exactly what you're saying. It's an emotional attachment that probably doesn't need to be that emotional because the quarterback is making a business decision. They're doing it because they like the coach or they like the offense for the most part. Now, sometimes it's like childhood fandom, like Tim Tebow at Florida, but it's not always like that. And usually it's not. Usually it is a business decision. They're not making the same decision you made, even if you think they are. And so don't get, what I'm saying is if you're a fan of a power program, don't get so sentimentally attached to your 5-star quarterback. There's another 5-star quarterback next year and another one the year after that and another one the year after that. And if your coach is doing it right, he's signing one of those every year. Only about 1 out of every 3 or 1 out of every 4 of them is going to wind up being your starting quarterback. And none of them may wind up being your starting quarterback because you may have to take a transfer.
Who was a 5-star quarterback from somebody else.
Right.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is stop getting so emotionally invested in a 17-year-old who hasn't proven anything yet and get financially invested in a 22-year-old who has. I mean,
yeah.
When you say it like that, it's very logical.
But here's the thing that you have
to make people think that way.
You have to consider that, you know, in this business, even when I was covering a big-time beat with really good players on the team, the fan interest inherently will always be on what's next. If there's a 5-star quarterback who's coming in and you have a 5-star starter, the people will read more about the person who is coming than the person who is there. I think it's human nature to constantly yearn for and dream about and consider what the height of the next wave could be. So I don't
Unless
know
you're a Chiefs fan. Like, are Chiefs fans the only people in the world who don't think this way?
Well, because they have the best quarterback in the world who has like 10 years left. So like that definitely helps. And like currently things are great. But like even Ohio State fans, when I was covering them, were more concerned about who they were getting than who they had. And who they had was pretty awesome always. And I just think that because fantasizing about the future, that's why mock drafts are so popular. Why? Because people want to know who their team could draft and they want to fantasize about what it would be like to have Jayden Daniels on their team or, JJ McCarthy, whoever else it is. So that is easier said than done because I don't think people are getting attached to the quarterback. I think they're getting attached to the idea of what the quarterback means for the program.
And CLT Meach points out Malachi Nelson left USC and no USC fans care. Right. Because they have Julian Lewis coming in. He's the next one. But guess what? They always had Miller Moss. Turns out he's pretty good.
So you as a coach, though, let's just like wrap this thing up here. You think that it's a better, your premise is it's a better bet to go with the person that you know what you're going to get out of.
Especially if you have high expectations and you know where that, like you already know where that person's ceiling is. If knowing where that person's ceiling is, you think that person can get you where you want to go. And like, for example, Kansas State playing for a Big 12 title to make the playoff. Oh, how could we possibly know if Will Howard could lead Kansas State to a Big 12 title? We already know that. He's done it.
Yeah.
So that's why. But again, like you said, it's more complicated than that. No one disagreed with Chris Kleiman's choice. No one, including me. So I'm not ripping him for it. I'm just saying, now that we've got some data and some evidence coming in, it may be that those people who do it at the highest level for the most money with the most riding on it, they might be onto something.
Yeah. Well, and also too, like as I find out year over year, sports are a long journey, and it looks bad now, but if Avery Johnson is a Heisman finalist next year, he'll look like a genius. Like, so it's just like, it's like the story's not written yet. But
well,
I do think
that's the other piece of this. I'm glad you mentioned that, because Will Howard is 1 year, and that's the part of this that the NFL equation doesn't have. Will Howard is 1 year. Avery Johnson is at least 2 more and possibly 3 more. Jackson Arnold was possibly 4 more because he redshirted last year. He only played in 4 games. So you're right. If this year doesn't work out, but the next 2 are great, then the coach made the right decision.
So I think that the actual thought process here isn't necessarily which quarterback to pour into. It's what year to pour into, right? Like if you know that your team is with that quarterback is capable of doing something great, even if that means sacrificing the future by losing somebody you want to have around for 3 years, that is a worthy payoff, because you want to get to the point where you get the trophy, right? Like, so I understand. Don't ever trade the current greatness or the current potential of the team that's coming up for the potential of the team in 2025, right? But I also don't know that always ties in directly to that decision. You just have to make the best, choice for what comes up. But like, you never know what's going to happen in 3 years down the line with anybody. I mean,
right.
Let
Producer
alone,
River with a good point. We wondered, should Josh Heupel have started Nico earlier last year? Should he have benched Joe Milton and started Nico? Maybe. But was it worth it? Would it have changed anything last year? I don't know that it would have, ultimately, for Tennessee.
Or what if he's just better now, though? Like, everything's revisionist history. You never know.
Yeah.
So my number one, my favorite one, Andy, was, I got roasted for this on the last show I was doing. But like, I was doing a thought exercise about 2 years ago when Sean Clifford was the starting quarterback at Penn State. What if Drew Aller played that year instead of Sean Clifford? They might not have won the Rose Bowl, but Drew Aller might have been much better last year when they were in both games that kept them from making the playoff. We don't know how that would have played out, but, they chose Sean Clifford. They got a trophy for the Rose Bowl, and it turned out that was the right decision, but we'll never know what the alternate, path would have been had Drew Aller played that whole year, got the experience, and been a much more effective passer last year when Penn State's offense stunk and they lost the only 2 games on the schedule they couldn't lose. I mean, this is just a game that you can play with everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that, again, like I said, with Hugh Freeze and all these coaches, that's what the money's for. You get paid to make those decisions, figure that out, make the best decision you can. It's not easy, but that's what the money's for. Ari, tomorrow, Wendy's sauciest take of the week. I will be coming up with 3 takes. You'll be judging which is the sauciest. I am sure there will be more realignment news. We also have some bonus pick segments that we couldn't get to on Monday. The games we need to pick. We need to pick Ole Miss, Kentucky, and we also need to pick Minnesota and Michigan. So we'll pick those tomorrow. I'm sure we'll talk realignment, and I will have 3 bold and spicy takes befitting the spicy, saucy nug sauce that I know we will all be enjoying at some point this week, because I will be enjoying that at some point this week. Ari, it's been a pleasure. We'll talk to everybody tomorrow.